There were only 23 days left until my graduate exams when my dad told me I couldn't go back to university. He called me out of the blue to ask a question. Since the school I was applying to was nearby, he asked if I could just come home to study. I had stayed at school through winter and summer breaks to work on a project. It had been over a year since I'd been home, and I figured my parents missed me. I had to go back for the exam anyway, so I requested leave to go study at home immediately. Before this, my parents told me they had bought a small villa in a new development. They renovated it and moved in right as I arrived back in San Francisco. I quickly discovered the new house was in a desolate, empty part of the city. A river divides the city into two banks, the north and the south. The north bank is the old urban heart where almost everyone lives. The south bank, however, used to be nothing but undeveloped mountains. The government recently flattened part of the mountain to build a new urban zone, but it wasn't fully developed yet, just a few scattered factories. Only shipping companies and parcel centers had built warehouses on the south bank. There was nothing else, not a single place for entertainment or leisure in our neighborhood. Ours was the very first residential development on the entire south bank. It was just rows of small villas, identical to the ones back in the city. The villas were brand new. No one had moved in yet, making it a total ghost town. The moment I stepped inside, I dropped my things. I excitedly dragged my parents along to tour our new place. It was a 3-story villa with a basement. There was a yard, though it wasn't very big. The layout was strange. The first floor felt cramped, but the second was different. The first floor was mostly the garage. My parents each have a car, and they promised me one once I get my license. So, the first floor had enough space for 3 cars. There was also a small room filled with random junk. The second floor had the master bedroom, my room, a lounge, and 2 studies. The third floor held a large living area and the kitchen. I took a quick look around to get my bearings. Then, my dad leaned in and asked if I wanted to see the basement. I nodded immediately and followed him downstairs. He led me back to the first floor, toward the storage room. The air felt heavy as we approached. When he swung the door open, I saw a pile of old appliances from our previous house and a pile of wood that looked like it had been repurposed from old crates. I looked around, confused, since this didn't look like a basement at all. My dad leaned in and whispered mysteriously, "This is the real entrance. The entrance to our private basement. It cost a fortune to build this place. Inside, we keep fine wines and some very sensitive documents." With that, my dad reached out and opened a large wardrobe. I peered inside and saw rows of clothes hanging there. They were outfits from years ago that he had kept for some reason. He stepped closer to the back of the wardrobe, pushed the clothes aside, and pressed a hidden button. It was tucked away in a corner, right behind the frame. Suddenly, a crack appeared in the back panel, revealing a secret door. My dad stepped through first, flipped the light switch, and I followed him. The room inside was small, with yet another door waiting at the far end. "Go ahead, honey," he said. "The password is your birthday." I said excitedly, heading straight for the door. I reached the keypad and punched in the numbers. I turned the knob with a click, but the door wouldn't budge. I turned around to ask why, and saw a man standing there. My dad had already turned around to leave. Suddenly, I realized something shocking. This was it. It was a trap. As I stepped out of the wardrobe, I saw my dad vanish behind the pile of old junk. His eyes were wide with intensity. With my own eyes wide, I watched an entrance open in the floor and wondered, this isn't just about protecting ourselves from burglars anymore. I headed straight down the stairs and finally reached the bottom. There stood a massive iron door, incredibly thick, with a heavy locking mechanism. It was hanging there, so I gave it a few knocks. The iron door echoed as I heard the sound of a key. The dull thud told me exactly how thick it was as my dad pulled out the key. He moved to unlock the padlock, and we had to work it together. We pulled the door open as a team. Inside, my suspicion and unease grew with every second. This definitely wasn't for burglars, so what was it for? "Go on, you go in first and take a look. I'm going upstairs to call your mother. We have something that we need to discuss with you," my father said. He looked at me with a dead serious expression as I stood by the iron door and patted my head. Then he turned around to head back up to the first floor. I stood there at the iron door as 1,000 possibilities raced through my mind. I shook them off and stepped silently into the basement. The light was dim, but once my eyes adjusted, I could see everything clearly. The layout of this place was massive. I started to get a real sense of dread. There was no way a basement this size was part of the original housing plans. This wasn't a cellar, it was a massive bunker. The space was packed with boxes of all sizes, stacked high against the walls. Only narrow aisles remained, leading to several different rooms. I took a quick look inside and saw exactly what they were hiding. Piles of instant noodles, compressed biscuits, and rows of canned goods. Vats of grain and gallons of cooking oil. Spices, bags of flour, rice, cereals, and pasta. There were even crates of basic hygiene products. It was mostly food, but none of it was junk. No snacks, no candy, just the essentials. I did some quick math in my head as I looked at the labels. If none of this expired, my family could eat for 7 or 8 years. I realized then that these supplies were meant for something big. Silence. I walked toward the nearest room. I noticed there were 6 rooms in total, but no central workspace. There were only 3 of us in our family. If 2 were used as bedrooms, what were the others for? I reached for the next door. This door was also made of heavy iron. It was just as thick as the entrance, and it wasn't locked, so I pushed against it. The door swung open to a room that was pitch black, with no windows. Not a single ray of light entered. It looked like an open mouth. A feeling of suffocating helplessness washed over me in my own home. I felt like a soldier who didn't even know where the war had started. Unable to find a light switch, I could only stand there staring into the void. Was this a panic room? But for what? A plague? Impossible. But after ruling everything out, the last option, no matter how absurd, had to be the truth. My parents must have heard some kind of news. I closed the door and stayed silent until I heard their footsteps. Are they zombies? We don't know. We aren't. Very sure, Mom said, shaking her head. Yes, listen to me. Do you remember your second cousin, your uncle's son? He didn't actually go to study abroad. He's currently working as an assistant in a biochemistry lab. 2 months ago, he sent your uncle a message, saying they found the corpse of an ape inside a cave. The professors brought it in for study and discovered the ape's body was carrying a prehistoric virus, a lethal, ancient strain. They still don't fully understand how the disease works. They placed the body in a sterile incubator to preserve it. My cousin called Dad and told him to get ready. He felt something was wrong. The corpse was intact, showing no signs of decomposition despite the virus. He begged the professor to abandon the research, but no one listened. As he spoke, Dad pulled out his phone and showed me the conversation. 3 days ago, my cousin had sent a message to my mom. It was a voice note. The body, it revived. Chaos. On this side. There's 1 week left. My cousin's voice was breaking, and I thought I heard growls and crying. We contacted your uncle. They bought an abandoned water tower in the mountains. They plan to stay there. My mind went blank. As I snapped back to reality, I realized our peaceful life was about to end. I rushed to hug my parents, feeling lucky that they were here. In the apocalypse, our family was still standing together. That was perhaps the greatest blessing of all. To give me a chance at happiness at the end of the world, Dad gave me a mission. He patted my shoulder and said, our stockpiling mission isn't over yet. The supplies your mom and I could think of are limited. We didn't dare ask for advice online, fearing we'd leak our location. I knew he was right. Once the word was out, the research would be tracked to us. In the apocalypse, the most terrifying thing isn't the zombies roaming the world. It's not the blood and gore, but the darkness of the human heart. Where there are people, there is conflict. You did the right thing, Dad, I said. Let's go buy more supplies first. We need to take inventory. There were too many things to get. We had to start buying now. Immediately. We only had 3 days left. We decided to split up and buy everything we could. We couldn't risk our lives. I quickly stopped them as they prepared to order home deliveries like before. No one had noticed them yet, but Mom looked at me with a worried expression. I forced a smile to calm her down. Don't worry, Dad is going to help me. Dad said not to reveal the address, so no one has noticed us yet. Aside from you, nobody knows about our new house or the massive stock we have. Everything was delivered to the old house, so everyone would think we still live there, and then we moved it all to Dad's place at night. Sitting in the car, I let out a long sigh. I felt a wave of relief. I didn't expect Dad to be this clever. Dad took my hand in one of his and Mom's in the other and said, let's go. Let's keep buying, the 3 of us together. We split up. We divided the task simply. Dad would buy basic survival machinery and Mom would handle the daily necessities while I would continue stockpiling food. After saying goodbye to my parents, I drove to the largest wholesale supermarket in Mexico. Since it was Wednesday, the place wasn't too crowded, so I ran straight to the snack aisle. Seeing the endless varieties of snacks, I stopped for a moment, lost in thought. I don't know if the zombies are sensitive to smell or sound yet, so no hot pot or snail noodles. They're too hard to prepare. And besides, there's the smell. If the scent gives away that people are in this villa, we're in serious danger. Things like potato chips take up too much space and make way too much noise. So those were out too. I turned right and cut them from the list immediately. Nothing spicy either. Spicy food makes you thirsty, and water is going to be a precious resource. Cookies? No, they're too dry and require too much water and jelly. Jerky? No, it takes up space and doesn't actually fill you up. I scanned the entire snack section with a critical eye. I ignored the junk and only grabbed a small amount of meat, specifically dried meats. Pork jerky and dried fruits provide energy without taking up space. Perfect. I don't know exactly how much room is in the basement, so it's better to buy only the most efficient items. Next, I headed over to the produce section. Looking at all those fresh, green vegetables gave me a headache. Vegetables have a very short shelf life. They rot and spoil way too easily. But since we can't live without them, I decided to skip the fresh produce for now. I'll talk to my parents at home later to figure out a better solution. After the vegetables, I moved on. I hit the frozen food section and did a quick lap. Pork, beef, chicken. I memorized every cut of poultry and seafood I needed without grabbing them yet. I didn't have time to pick them one by one, and I couldn't carry that much anyway. Finally, I reached the rice and noodle aisle and picked out the essentials. I grabbed one sample of each noodle, dumpling, and wonton pack, and then I pushed my cart straight to the manager's office. I told him I wanted 10 cases of every single item in my cart. Hearing it was a massive order, the manager dropped everything to help me. He rushed to escort me through the store personally. I pointed toward the frozen section as we walked. I told him I needed 60 pounds of pork, 60 pounds of beef, and 60 pounds of fish, plus 20 pounds of squid and 20 pounds of shrimp. I added a few more seafood items, thinking we could finish those off tonight. Then, I picked out 20 sacks of flour. I ordered 20 sacks of rice and 20 sacks of flour, oil, salt, vinegar, soy sauce, cooking wine. I took 5 cases of every condiment. Finally, I paid the bill and gave them the address to the old house. I told them to deliver everything there, then drove over to wait. While I waited, I used a delivery app to order dozens of cases of instant noodles. 10 minutes later, the delivery trucks started arriving one after another. I told them to just leave everything in the yard. I didn't want them going inside since the furniture was already gone. The place was almost empty, and I couldn't let them know we didn't actually live here. I stayed busy all afternoon until the yard was completely full. As the workers were leaving, I overheard them joking around. They said with all these supplies, everyone would envy us if a lockdown happened. My heart skipped a beat. I had to act fast. Those workers knew exactly how many supplies were sitting here. There was a chance they'd come back to loot us when the zombies arrived. Protecting a war chest like this was going to be a massive challenge. We had to move all of this under the cover of darkness without being seen. I called my parents immediately to check on their status. I asked them exactly when they were coming to help with the move. They told me to stay at the old house for now and said they were on their way. At midnight, I took down the surveillance camera. I moved it from the living room to a discreet spot in the yard to cover the whole perimeter. Then, I sat perfectly still in the dark living room. I monitored everything outside through my phone. It was pitch black, and I didn't turn on the yard lights since it was fenced in. From the outside, you couldn't see a thing. The supplies just looked like blurry piles. You couldn't tell what they were. I felt a wave of relief, but we had to finish the move before dawn. Time was ticking away. At 1 in the morning, my phone buzzed and woke me up. My parents had finally arrived. The 3 of us started moving everything with total stealth. We took turns driving and hauling the load. Since we were the only ones who had moved in yet, there was no night security guard. The gate opened automatically by scanning our plate, so no one saw us. We stayed busy like that all through the night. Finally, we finished moving every last bit of food. I didn't even have the strength to check the inventory or see what my parents brought. I collapsed the second my head hit the pillow. The next morning, I dragged myself up and sat in the living room. I pulled back the curtains and saw the sunlight hitting the lawn. Nothing seemed to hint at the coming apocalypse, so I headed up to the 3rd floor. I found that my parents had already prepared a full breakfast. While we ate, I asked them how we were going to handle the vegetable situation. Mom suggested we grow our own crops right there in the yard. She said she'd read stories about zombie outbreaks where people always grew their own food. It was the only way to keep up our vitamin intake, and the perimeter wall made it feel safe. I thought about it for a moment and shook my head. No, we can't do that. If someone comes looking, we need to hide. We'll all be in the basement, but imagine if they break in and see no one. If they see fresh vegetables growing, food, and cars, they'll know. It would be a dead giveaway that people are hiding here, and that those people are living quite comfortably. They'd realize we have a massive stockpile, and that's too dangerous. Dad agreed with me immediately. Planting in the yard is too risky, so he suggested reinforcing the wall instead. I shook my head again. Our housing development has a very specific, uniform look. We shouldn't change the exterior if we want to stay camouflaged among the empty houses. Our house is tucked away in the back, and I want to keep it that way. If looters come through, they'll start with the villas at the front of the complex. If those look picked over, they'll assume the houses in the back are empty and move on. That's our biggest advantage, and I made sure to explain it clearly. I laid out my reasoning to my parents, point by point. First, we have to keep the villa's original appearance exactly as it is. We shouldn't add anything that draws attention, especially since zombies don't care about fences. To keep people out, a simple perimeter fence with a few sensors will be enough. That should give us all the warning we need. Second, those 3 cars parked on the 1st floor are a dead giveaway. If an intruder realizes we're the only ones still living here, we're in deep trouble. They might decide to squat in our house for a long time just for the remaining supplies. That would only increase the risk of them discovering our basement hideout. Third, the basement ventilation and lights need a constant power source. But if our house is the only one with solar panels, it'll stick out like a sore thumb. The best move is to spread them out across the neighboring roofs. If every house has one, ours won't look special, even if the panels are large. Not only will we store more energy this way, but we'll blend right in. It drastically reduces the risk of being spotted from a distance. As for the water, our best bet is to stockpile as much bottled water as possible. We can store it all in the basement without worrying about the building's structural load. So we can stockpile a massive amount of it. We could also get a purifier, but we should use it as little as possible. It has to be our absolute last resort. As for vegetables, we can buy and eat plenty of fresh ones for now, and we need to start pickling the rest. After that, we'll be stuck with nothing but dehydrated greens. We'll have to rehydrate them when the time comes. The only real solution is to rely on technology. 6th point, we need to buy several industrial freezers. If they're big enough, the meat and fish we buy will last for a long time. My parents listened to my plan in stunned silence, clearly moved. I could see them thinking, our daughter has grown up, she's thought of everything. Don't worry, my father said. I've already taken care of the freezers and the water. He told me the basement walls were already reinforced and soundproofed. CG, you probably haven't even seen the supplies in the basement yet. Let your father go out and buy more things today, don't you worry about it. We'll stay here, take inventory, and tell him exactly what's missing. Even though my cousin said we have a week left, We don't actually know the exact day the world ends. Exactly, it's better not to go out at all, so my mother and I stayed behind. We headed back to the basement while my father went to handle the errands. His main mission was to secure the solar panels. When I stepped into the basement, I realized we had already stockpiled a mountain of supplies. It turned out the other 4 rooms were dedicated entirely to water and freezers. I pushed open the first door and found it packed with water jugs. They were those massive 16-liter home containers, stacked so high I couldn't even count them. 3 out of the 4 rooms were being used for the same thing, pure water storage, while the last room held 4 custom-made industrial refrigerators. 2 of them were high-capacity double-door units. The left side was a 500-liter fridge, while the right was a 450-liter independent freezer. They were already stuffed with meat, vegetables, and fresh fruit. My mother and I looked at the hall, worried about the power consumption. We decided to use all of them for storage for the time being, but the moment the grid goes down, we'll have to shut 2 of them off. In the main basement area, we began organizing everything into specific zones. We started with the dry goods and the food I had managed to get. Adding in what I bought yesterday, we had a total of 120 bags of rice. We had 120 bags of flour and 50 boxes of instant noodles. There were 30 boxes of dried rice noodles and 20 boxes of frozen wontons, plus 20 boxes of dumplings and 20 large packs of bread. Each box held 5 packs of various instant noodles. We had 20 boxes of every flavor, plus 24 packs of spices, 5 boxes of each spice, 10 boxes of cooking oil, and 5 boxes of biscuits. I added 10 sacks of grains to the compressed rations. We had a variety of rice and noodles, plus 10 boxes of canned goods, 10 boxes of pork rinds, 10 of beef jerky, and 10 of canned meat. There were boxes of dried fruit and the frozen pork skin I bought yesterday. That was the food, plenty of staples, but not a single snack in sight. I sorted through the toiletries Mom bought and kept out only 5 bottles of shampoo. I added 5 bottles of body wash to the pile, 5 tubes of toothpaste and 10 toothbrushes, 6 facial cleansers, 10 sponges, and 6 towels. The rest went into storage. We locked the study and I finally headed to my room. My room and my parents' were like tiny apartments in a crowded city. They were small, barely enough space for a bed and a desk. No closets, just a rack with a few outfits for each season. I guess my days of wearing pretty clothes are over. Each room had its own bathroom with just a toilet and a small shower head. The space was incredibly cramped. The room seemed fine to me. As long as I could sleep, it was enough. Either way, there was barely any space left for us to move around. The basement had an open kitchen with a standard stove and all the utensils. Everything was already set up there. There was no sunlight, and we hadn't prepared a spot for lighting. Mom said we'd have to dry clothes outside in secret and bring them in fast. I called Dad and asked him to buy some cameras. The smaller they were, the better. I planned to install them around the neighborhood so we'd see anyone coming. After that, I started bringing things down from the upper floor. I grabbed the down comforters, heavy blankets, and winter gear. Who knew how long we'd be living down here in the cold? We put a small sofa in the center, and I brought my prized projector. I even hauled down the game console I'd kept for years. Tonight, I plan to download all the movies and series I never get tired of. We could finally watch TV and play games together as a family. Looking at the basement now, completely packed with supplies, I felt a strange weight in my chest. It was a messy mix of relief and deep anxiety. I was happy we were ready, but terrified of what would happen if we were caught. Even though there were 3 of us, if the intruders were a group of strong, armed men, it would be nearly impossible to hold them off, so I had a plan. I placed the diesel generator and the heavy machinery directly in front of the entrance. The only way to open that door from the outside would be to move all that weight. Trying to force that massive iron gate would be a lost cause. I had to be careful. I had to protect my parents at all costs. By the time we finished organizing the basement, it was already dark, so we headed back upstairs. Mom went straight to the kitchen to start on dinner. Since Dad still wasn't back yet, I started scrolling through Weibo obsessively until suddenly, a specific keyword spiked in the trending topics, catching zombies. My heart jumped. Had they appeared already? I clicked the tag and found it was just a single post. A blogger wrote, "The end of the world is coming. The zombies are here. There is no way out." No video, no replies, just that one sentence hanging there. I checked the news from my cousin's country, the place I had fled just to get home. I wondered if the spread had accelerated and already reached us here. Right then, I heard the front door swing open. Dad finally walked in, hauling more than 10 boxes of security cameras. I had to hit a dozen different stores to find these pinhole cameras. With these, we wouldn't have to worry about anyone spotting them. I planned to scout the neighborhood tonight to draw a preliminary map. Then, using our house as the center, I'd install the cameras in a radial pattern. After dinner, my father and I got ready. We grabbed a hammer and a small knife and headed out. We walked the perimeter and confirmed that, besides us, no one else had moved in. We also noticed that since the houses were brand new, most of the gates and yards weren't even locked yet. We could slip into the other villas and install solar panels without anyone noticing. As we walked, I used my phone to record everything. I made sure to log every turn and every path. After 3 laps, we went back home to start drawing. I sketched a map of the entire complex, marking every villa that had an open gate. My parents prepared to head out that very night to set up the equipment. We had to get those solar panels up before anything went wrong. Once they were installed in the other villas, I'd link them to a network. Everything would feed into one central battery system. Then, we would run the wiring from our house directly to that power source. That way, we could siphon the energy from all the other panels. Meanwhile, I grabbed the pinhole cameras already synced to my phone. I scouted every single corner of the complex. Every time I found a good vantage point, I set one up. I even made sure to hide one right at the main entrance. Once the panels and cameras were all in place, I headed back to the house. I showed the feed to my parents, and my father looked at me with a grim expression. "Tomorrow will be the last time," he said firmly. "The last time we go out for supplies. I'm going to buy tactical knives and blades. Honey, go to the pharmacy for antibiotics and painkillers. Buy in bulk, but hit different stores. CG, you keep buying food. Get your favorite snacks, and buy more cat litter. We'll meet at the old house. Leave your cars there tonight. Don't bring them back here." I lay in bed that night, realizing tomorrow was my final day of freedom before the end. My heart felt heavy. What was this world about to become? With tomorrow's mission weighing on my mind, I slowly drifted off to sleep. I woke up at the crack of dawn. I realized my parents had already left for their errands. I hurriedly stuffed a piece of bread into my mouth and grabbed my keys. I drove toward the supermarket, but I hadn't forgotten the risks. The staff there already knew my face. If I went back as myself, I'd be recognized instantly. To avoid any suspicion, I decided to head to a different supermarket this time. I grabbed piles of my favorite snacks, even some things for the house. I snatched up 2 giant bottles of Gamer energy drinks and 5 more bottles of soda. I loaded up on bags of cat litter and stuck to buying common snacks. I didn't think I needed to be that careful, but as I reached the parking lot, I saw them. A huge crowd was gathering in the distance, whispering about something. I didn't stick around. I walked quickly to my car and threw everything into the trunk. I got behind the wheel and took a deep breath. After double-checking that all the doors were locked, I started driving. I drove slowly toward the commotion. There were too many people, so I had to park further away. I rolled down my window, just a crack. I looked at a middle-aged man standing nearby and asked, "What's going on?" Some young foreigners just pulled up in their car, and as soon as they stepped out, they collapsed, one after another. "Look at them. It's not right. They're convulsing. Someone already called the ambulance." "Don't get any closer, young lady. It's terrifying," the man warned. He stood there, clutching 2 large grocery bags, looking completely shaken. He explained the situation with a trembling voice. "Foreigners? Convulsing?" Hearing those keywords made my blood run cold. I was ready to roll up the window and flee right then and there. But then I noticed 2 cans of baby formula in his grocery bag. "Sir, you should head home too. I heard the flu is getting really bad lately." He adjusted the heavy bags in his hands and paused. "You're right," he said. "I'm leaving." He mentioned making something nice for his daughter and headed to his car. I quickly pulled away and called my parents. As I drove, I told them everything I had just seen at the supermarket. I tried to ignore the chaos in my rearview mirror. Shouts erupted behind me as the 4 young foreigners lay on the pavement. They were flat on the ground, convulsing violently. White foam was bubbling from their mouths. People were coming out of the store with their arms full of groceries. They stood in circles, trapped by their own curiosity, while someone shouted about an ambulance. I already called them. They said they're on their way. The police were coming too, but despite the panic, nobody moved away. "I'm a doctor. Let me through," a man suddenly shouted, pushing past the crowd. He rushed toward the one convulsing the hardest and knelt down. He didn't hold back. He grabbed the head and pried one eye open to examine it. It was bloodshot, with red veins that seemed alive, crawling across the eyeball. The man frowned, and just as he was about to continue his checkup, the convulsing foreigner suddenly vomited a mouthful of thick, black blood. He collapsed face down on the pavement. "Sir, are you hurt? Can you speak to me?" the man asked, patting him and trying to help him sit up. He hadn't even finished his sentence when the young foreigner suddenly bolted upright. He lunged and sank his teeth into the man's neck, ignoring his desperate blows. He tore a chunk of flesh right out of him. The crowd screamed and scattered like mad, but they were too packed together to move fast. In that same instant, the others who were convulsing vomited blood and stood up. They pounced on the nearest people, tearing and biting until blood splattered everywhere. After taking a bite, they would immediately lunge at the next person. The scene was total chaos, and in the panic, no one noticed the first victim. The man who was bitten first was now lying on the ground himself. He began to convulse violently just as I pulled into the garage of our old house. I found my parents pacing the yard, looking sick with worry. I barely had the door open before I jumped out of the car. My mother rushed over and pulled me into a tight embrace. "CG, we were so worried about you," she cried. I patted her back to calm her down, though I hadn't expected it either. I didn't think the zombie outbreak would be hitting this close to home. I signaled to my father immediately. I told him to open the trunk so we could start moving the supplies. We needed to transfer everything into his car first. Just as we were lifting the cat litter, our neighbor stepped outside. He smiled at us and asked, "Oh, did you guys go shopping? What did you get?" My father's movements shifted instantly as he tried to hide the haul. He was about to shove a bag into the trunk, but he changed direction. He set it on the ground casually, acting like he'd just taken it out. He tilted the bag of litter just enough for the neighbor to see the label. "CG wants a cat," he said calmly. "We just bought some litter and a bed." The neighbor looked at the bag and nodded. "Tell CG to bring the kitten over soon." He gathered his laundry and went back inside, and I finally let out a breath. I felt a massive wave of relief wash over me. Mom composed herself and helped us finish loading the rest of the gear. Once everything was packed, we all piled into my father's car. We took off, but the road was already swarming with speeding cars and people running for their lives. The air was a thick mess of panic, sobbing, and screams. It was impossible to tell where the noise was even coming from. Suddenly, a car ahead of us lost control and didn't even tap the brakes at the turn. It slammed straight into a storefront, and for a few seconds, everything went still. Then, a woman with a blood-soaked shoulder forced the door open and stumbled out. Her clothes were shredded, her hair was a matted mess, and her face was completely covered in gore, her eyes bloodshot and wild. Dripping in blood, she didn't look like a human being anymore. Her mouth was a mangled wreck of flesh and bone, torn wide open. The skin was ripped all the way back to her ears, and the moment she saw our car, she lunged. We were moving too fast to stop, and she collided with us head-on. She hit the driver's side door, her face flattening against the glass. That ruined mouth looked like a grotesque, dehydrated grin as she reached for the handle. She started slamming her head against the window over and over again. She was completely immune to the pain, and a crack began to spiderweb across the glass. I pointed at the fracture and shouted, "Dad, the window is going to break." I looked ahead and screamed, "Dad, watch out, there's a curve." My father understood instantly and jerked the steering wheel in a sharp swerve. The car jumped onto the sidewalk, scraping hard against the concrete wall. I could hear the zombie's back scraping hard. It was being crushed against the wall as we hit the curve. My dad floored the accelerator and finally shook the creature off. We all took a breath of relief, thinking we had lost her for good. But I knew the car window wouldn't survive another hit like that. Fortunately, the rest of the drive went by without any more incidents. We arrived safe and sound at the entrance of the residential area. The main gate was divided into two parts. There was a heavy sliding iron gate and a standard security barrier arm. Since there were no guards left to manage the traffic, the iron gate was usually left open, with only the barrier arm down. The barrier opened automatically after recognizing our license plate. I realized we had to close that iron gate now while there weren't many zombies around. My dad looked at me and asked, "Ready to get out with me?" I told him, "No, Dad, stay in the car and keep the engine running just in case." I scanned the surroundings with caution before stepping out. I opened my door and sprinted toward the heavy iron gate. I pushed it with all my strength until it shut with a loud, metallic bang. Finally, I slid the heavy bolt into place and locked it down. With the gate secured, we finally drove inside. We began moving everything from the car to the basement, one trip at a time. We made sure to lock the door behind us tightly. We covered the large patio furniture to make the villa look abandoned and hid the courtyard from view. I threw a tarp over the car so the shattered window wouldn't be so obvious. And just like that, my family's life in the basement began. After everything that happened this morning, I was completely exhausted by the time I sat down. I collapsed onto the sofa and checked my phone, feeling like my bones had turned to jelly. While my parents prepared lunch in the kitchen, I scrolled through the news. Major media outlets were flooding the Weibo trending charts with the zombie outbreak. There wasn't a single celebrity gossip post left. 8 out of the top 10 were about the undead. One post was from a blogger named @MagicianU. He wrote, "Last night, I woke up late and ordered food, but the delivery guy acted strange. After dropping the order, he ran back and pounded on my door, but I was too scared to open it. Now that I see the news, I'm sending a message to that delivery guy saying I'm sorry." Another user, @CharlieChalky, asked if anyone else had seen zombie posts days ago or if it was just his imagination. A user named @ILikeYouMost posted that they had a supermarket full of supplies for anyone with cash. I scrolled through the comments calmly until one specific username caught my eye. @IWantAMillionYear wrote, "A girl bought a mountain of food at our store recently. She must have known this was coming." My hands started shaking as I opened the replies and kept reading. The comments were demanding my address, saying they wanted it too. One user wrote, "How dare she hoard everything? What a bitch." Another added, "She knew, and she didn't say a word. We all could have stocked up on supplies." And another, "So selfish. I better not find out who she is." I thought to myself, even if I had said something, would you have even believed me? I clicked on the profile of @IWantAMillionAyear and saw the IP address wasn't from this city. My heart, which had been hanging by a thread, finally calmed down. It seemed that in this crisis, other people had also prepared themselves. The aroma drifting from the kitchen eased my tension. I had never felt so happy. I've never been an especially good person, nor am I a savior. In the apocalypse, my only wish is for my family to survive. The government made an announcement. "Citizens, stay inside. Do not go out." They promised the army would conduct rescue operations in the streets to ensure maximum safety. The message ended with, "Do not believe or spread rumors." The most popular comment was from @ILikeYouMost, the one with the supermarket. People were attacking him. "How dare you profit from a national tragedy? Have you no shame?" Another warned, "You're money mad. Aren't you afraid someone will leak your address and hunt you down?" @ILikeYouMost replied, "If you're brave enough, come and kill me. You think you can get past my supermarket security? I'm not afraid. Just you wait." I frowned, thinking, bragging about your supplies like that, do you really think nothing will happen? My mom's voice snapped me back. "Honey, come and eat." I put down my phone and walked happily to the table. I felt truly grateful. After finishing the meal and the dishes, we sat on the sofa with some snacks. Suddenly, the security camera alarm on my phone went off. I remembered setting it up while I was waiting for the renovations. I had moved one camera to a corner of the patio to watch over my parents. Someone was there. I opened the app and saw a man in pajamas. He was holding a sharpened kitchen knife in his hand. He jumped from the neighbor's yard into ours and hid the knife behind his back. He crept along the wall, heading straight for our front door. It was my neighbor, and I knew exactly what he was planning. Clutching the knife, he knocked on our door, but I didn't move a muscle. When no one answered, he moved silently toward the large bay window. Watching him approach the balcony, I realized what he wanted to check. He was looking to see if the window was locked. The layout of our house and the neighbor's house were identical. He knew that if the latch on the large window wasn't secure, he could force the glass open from the outside, and then he'd be inside. He looked around, moving with silent, calculated steps. Through the camera, I saw a malicious grin spread across his face as he reached his goal. He broke in, but I had already spent every cent I had on the renovations. I had removed the indoor cameras, so I couldn't see what he was doing inside. But I could easily imagine that pathetic man who couldn't even live without his mother. I could almost see my neighbor's face the moment he made his discovery. Finding the house almost completely empty, he was definitely cursing my name. I pictured his face twisting in pure frustration. This morning, he saw us arrive with groceries and greeted us with a smile, even inviting me to lunch. Now, late at night, he was sneaking into our home with a kitchen knife. That is the reality of the human heart when the apocalypse hits. Dad, we left something behind at the old house, I whispered. He was also staring at the camera feed, his brow furrowed in a deep scowl. Yeah, we left the food that was about to expire, the stuff we couldn't bring all at once. I knew my father was feeling the same fear I was. If we hadn't left that house, would we be the ones facing that knife right now? Lucky him, he even managed to walk away with a little bit of food. A few moments later, his stealthy silhouette emerged again. His figure reappeared on the screen, passing right in front of the patio camera. Both of his hands were overflowing with our supplies. He tossed them over the wall toward the center of the city, landing them on the other side before heading back in for more. On his fourth trip, someone began pounding violently on the patio gate. Well, more visitors. How lively. I pulled some sunflower seeds from my snack bag and settled in to watch the show. My neighbor was shaking with terror, dropping his bag and making a loud thud. The people outside heard it and started hammering on the gate even harder. Damn it, I heard you. Someone's inside. That was the sound of a bag. You're counting the food, aren't you? Open up. Don't make me break this down. I couldn't see outside, but from the voices, I knew it was a group of heavy-set men. I watched the small figure of my neighbor trembling in the yard before he crept back. He reached the large window, slowly slipped inside, locked it, and vanished into the shadows. Once he disappeared, the group of men outside grew even more enraged by the silence. I don't know what they were using, but they beat that heavy iron gate until it started to shudder. 10 minutes later, the lock couldn't take it anymore, and the gate swung wide open. Down below, in all that time, I never saw my neighbor come back out. So he was still hiding inside our house in the city district. They burst in, 5 or 6 men, all tall and built like tanks. Every one of them was armed with knives and heavy clubs. I narrowed my eyes to see their faces. They looked familiar, but I couldn't place them. They pointed at the bag my neighbor had dropped, whispering among themselves. Then, one of the men stepped forward toward the house. He raised a massive hammer and swung with everything he had. The large window gave way, and the glass shattered into a million pieces. They forced their way inside, and I feared things wouldn't end well for my neighbor. When they finally emerged, they were happily lugging heavy sacks of rice and flour. The last man to walk out looked rough and disheveled. He was covered in blood, carrying my limp, bleeding neighbor over his shoulder. The burly man spat on the ground. Didn't they bring a mountain of supplies here days ago? I recognized them then. They were the guys from the moving company. The leader laughed coldly. They must have hidden the rest somewhere else. Maybe they're even watching us from somewhere right now. His eyes scanned the patio, searching the shadows for any sign of life. Finally, they turned around and left. A cold sweat broke out over me. I felt like he had looked right into my soul. My parents stayed silent, their faces dark with a grim realization of what was happening. My mother finally broke the silence. They took Li Lao San, she whispered. They actually took him. Li Lao San was our neighbor, the third son of the Li family, as everyone called him. On the monitor, a thick pool of blood still stained the patio floor. A crimson trail smeared all the way from the front door to the gate. He was already dead, so the only reason to drag his body away like that. I didn't dare finish the thought. Were they really going to eat him? My father spoke with a chilling calmness, while my mother bolted toward the kitchen. I heard her retching into the sink as the bile rose in my own throat. Nausea washed over me, and I sat in stunned silence on the sofa. After a long while, my mother finally returned to the room. I looked them both dead in the eye. We can't afford to be good people anymore, I said firmly. After what happened to Li Lao San, the lesson was carved in blood. None of us had an appetite, so we decided to head to bed early. Lying in the dark, I checked my phone and saw the world outside was pure chaos. The #1 trending topic on Weibo was terrifying. It was a video of a massacre at a local supermarket. The owner had posted a video showing off his massive stockpile, and now people were hunting him. The shelves were packed, and I knew his warehouse was probably overflowing too. The owner didn't show his face, but his voice sounded greasy and full of pride. He said he'd share his stash if people paid up, but when I heard his prices, I actually held my breath in shock. A single bag of potato chips for 1,000? What a miserable piece of trash. He didn't realize that in an apocalypse with no end in sight, money is the most useless thing on earth. I opened my own bag of chips and kept scrolling through the comments. Without exception, everyone was insulting him, raining down curses in the chat. The owner didn't care. He even replied, "If you're so brave, come and kill me." He even pinned that comment to the top. I got bored and checked the zombie situation instead. Outbreaks were popping up in almost every major city, but for now, the countryside was quiet. It was the safest place to be. The more remote the village, the better. Online, people were begging for advice on how to build shelters in the rural areas. But how do you transport supplies to a safe village hidden in the mountains? People were getting desperate. The more I read, the more anxious I felt, so I decided to try and get some sleep. Suddenly, the trending topic about the supermarket changed, and my curiosity got the better of me. I clicked back in to see what was happening. The owner had already deleted the video, but it was too late. Based on the layout of the shelves and his IP address, people had already found him. Someone had deduced his exact location. They posted the supermarket's address in the comments for everyone to see. The owner panicked and deleted the video, but it was far too late. Screenshots of his address were already circulating everywhere. I knew exactly where this was going. It was going to be a long, sleepless night for that store owner. Exhaustion finally took over, and I drifted off to sleep in my room. On the second day of the zombie outbreak, I woke up early and got dressed. I headed straight to the living room. It was time to relieve my dad so he could finally get some rest. Feeling restless, I went to the kitchen to fix us some breakfast. I pulled out some instant ramen and started boiling the water. I checked my phone, wondering how much longer the communication systems would last. I dropped the noodles into the pot. Then I cracked an egg into the broth for each of us. 3 bowls in total, steaming and ready to eat. I served the food and started eating my own bowl of hot noodles. I put on an old show to distract myself while I ate. By noon, Dad was back up and helping Mom in the kitchen. They were preparing my favorite, beef stew with tomatoes. My family ate lunch together, laughing and talking like everything was normal. Suddenly, my uncle called my mom's phone. He wanted to give us the exact location of his water tower property. They had seen the news and felt the city wasn't safe anymore. They thought it was better to head to the mountains, away from people and zombies. My parents kept chatting with my aunt and uncle about their lives. I stayed on my phone, scrolling through Weibo to see what was happening outside. It was the fastest way to get news, but who knew how much longer the internet would last? Then I saw a new post from that supermarket owner. I expected another video of him bragging, but when I opened it, my blood ran cold. I saw a heavy-set man, tied up and kneeling on the floor. His face was covered in tears and snot as he screamed for mercy. What the hell was this? A massive, muscular man with a machete appeared in the frame. He swung the blade, and the heavy man's head hit the floor, rolling to his feet. The killer didn't even flinch. He just kicked the bloody head aside like a piece of trash. Blood splattered everywhere, but no one moved to clean it up. The video cut to black right there. It was only the second day of the outbreak, and people were already murdering each other. If it was this bad now, how much more cruel would they become later? Once the food runs out, the people from the North District will come out to scavenge. How many of them will set their sights on the South District? This place is so prosperous, and our residential area is the only one of its kind here. It's also the best place in the South to avoid the zombies, or so it seems to me. I fear this entire zone won't be spared from a violent dispute. Not because of the zombies, but because of the humans themselves. Day 5 of the outbreak. Someone on Weibo summarized the traits of the infected. First, their eyes are white and their vision is incredibly weak. They track the living through sound and smell alone. Second, they don't eat other animals, only primates. They have no interest in the dead and won't attack a corpse. Third, they feel no pain and there is no cure, but they aren't slow like in the movies. Only a shot to the head can kill them. Fourth, there are no mutations among them yet. Fifth, they aren't afraid of the light. However, they definitely prefer the darkness. Sixth, a bite, a scratch, or fluid contact with an open wound causes the infection. Bites are instant, but fluid contact has an unpredictable transformation time. I felt like I was watching a horror movie, tracking the daily distribution of these monsters. I wasn't even this dedicated when I was studying for my master's degree. Being in the basement isn't as comfortable as a high floor. I can't even use my binoculars. I can't observe anything, so I won't be the first to document the next change. Day 7 of the outbreak. The internet connection finally died. I was officially trapped in the basement. My contact with the outside world had been completely severed. Nothing special happened during those quiet days underground. To prepare for a power and water outage, we decided to organize all our supplies. We started sorting everything and even remodeled the basement a little. My father had actually bought a vacuum sealer before the outbreak started. Did he have a premonition about the zombies? I pulled out the labels and stuck them onto the non-perishable food items. I wrote down the expiration dates and stacked them in the back row. Against the wall, Mom pulled the perishable meat products out of the freezer. She handed them to Dad so he could vacuum seal every piece. We had to do this in case the power failed and we couldn't finish the food in time. Organizing everything took us an entire day, and the trash began to pile up. It sat right outside the heavy iron door, becoming a major headache. It was a difficult problem for the family, and one we hadn't anticipated. Living in a basement, how exactly were we supposed to get rid of the waste? We couldn't just take it outside, especially not now. For days now, people from the north have been fleeing toward the south. The southern area used to be deserted, but now we hear constant screams for help. They sound so close, yet they never appear within the range of my cameras. Based on my calculations, the rest of the community will be overrun in 3 days. Mom recently washed all the clothes and blankets from the basement. She took them out to the patio just like that. We didn't go back into the main villa to dry them, fearing we'd leave tracks. Instead, we just used a small corner of the patio. I tied a rope to an iron post to make a makeshift clothesline. We were preparing ourselves to not step foot outside for at least half a month. Dad reset the password for the hidden door inside the closet. What if there was something in the villa that revealed our birth dates? If someone figured out the code, it would basically be a death sentence. Day 9 of the zombie outbreak. The number of people in the south is surging. And as the crowds grow, the number of zombies increases right along with them. Lately, cars are constantly speeding past, crushing zombies under their tires. At first, the sight made me want to vomit, but now I can watch and eat at the same time. I was just finishing a pack of beef jerky when I saw them. Strangers had arrived at the community gates. Many have been eyeing this place, driving up to observe, but they lack the vision to survive. Most people lack the courage to get out and push that iron gate, which obviously won't budge. Then I saw 4 vans pull up and stop one by one at the community entrance. Using the vehicles as a shield, 2 or 3 men jumped out and tried to force the gate open. When he realized it was locked tight, one man kicked the iron in a fit of rage. The metallic clang echoed, instantly drawing every nearby zombie. The monsters swarmed the vehicles, slamming their bodies against the metal. They were more frantic than any I had seen since the world ended. The horde grew so thick they began piling on top of one another, desperately trying to reach the windows. The men scrambled back inside as the zombies started climbing the chassis. Dozens of them were now completely surrounding the 4 vans. I stared at the camera monitor, feeling a sense of doubt. Why weren't they driving away? What were they waiting for? Suddenly, the last van opened its trunk and poured out a massive amount of liquid. It was blood, pure blood. Where could they have possibly gotten that much blood? The zombies caught the scent and charged en masse toward that final van. The first 3 vans used the distraction to break the siege and escape effortlessly. I realized with a chill that it was human blood, and they had used it as bait. Then, they threw something bloody out of the trunk. It was tied to the back of the vehicle with a thick rope. The zombies lunged at it, tearing into the flesh in a chaotic mess. It was a person. They had tied a living human being to the back of that van. Without hesitation, the driver floored it, dragging the bloody body across the pavement. The person writhed and screamed, leaving a long, crimson trail behind them. The van kept moving slowly, using the victim as live bait to lure the horde away from the gate. Once the van disappeared, only that gruesome trail of blood remained. I had seen countless zombies get crushed and mangled before, but staring at that streak of blood at the entrance left me frozen with horror. A living person, used as a distraction and dragged like trash through the neighborhood. A chill ran through my entire body as I realized their goal. They were coming inside. I wondered if people like that could even be considered lucky to survive. Could you even call them human anymore? It was the 9th day of the outbreak, and after yesterday's incident, we decided to seal the basement. My mother gathered all our belongings from the upper floors. We took down the curtains and cleared the rooms, silently making the house look completely abandoned and empty. I waited for Mom by the door of the storage room, making sure the hidden entrance was locked tight behind us. I made sure the door was sealed tight. I gathered some fine dust from the basement floor. I used a hair dryer to blow it across the room, making it look like the place hadn't been touched in years. Dad was waiting for us at the basement entrance, and together we shut the heavy iron gate. We secured it with thick, heavy chains. Then we braced it with a doorstop and reinforced it again. Finally, we piled all our heavy mechanical equipment right in front of the entrance. Even though we had soundproofing material, I worried about the food that made too much noise, like the potato chips and snacks. I tore open the packaging and moved everything into airtight containers. Once finished, we sat down in front of the surveillance monitors. We waited there all day long. I didn't take my eyes off the road, but there was no sign of those people. They caused such a scene yesterday, yet today, nothing but silence until nightfall. They didn't show their faces during the day. Over dinner, Dad and I discussed our next move. The chance of a night attack was high, since the darkness belongs to the monsters. We decided to keep a 1-person guard rotation through the night. And just like that, the 10th day of the outbreak began. 2 days have passed, and I want to glue my eyes to the monitor 24/7, but no one has come. We were just about to finish off a whole sack of rice. My mom checks the supplies every single day. She feels like cooking is her life's work now. Does having an abundance of provisions give her peace of mind? What are we eating today? I asked, following the aroma into the kitchen. Mom lifted the lid of the pot and smiled. To my surprise, she was cooking hairy crabs. What a treat. She had found a gift box of them tucked away in a corner of the fridge. Eating steamed hairy crabs in a dark room felt like an absolute luxury. Dad was sitting on the sofa holding my tablet in his hand. He looked tense, staring at the screen with a grim expression. He seemed reluctant to even blink for a second. I dropped my crab and ran straight over to him. Dad didn't say a word. He just handed the tablet over to me. He opened one of the surveillance feeds and pointed at the perimeter. "You have good eyes," he said. "Look for yourself. What is this?" I took the tablet and followed his finger, my heart starting to race. I don't know when it happened, but a ladder had appeared in the corner of the fence. It was leaning right against the wall, standing just a bit taller than the fence itself. I had been so glued to the main entrance camera these last few days that I only glanced at the other areas, which is why I missed the ladder entirely. In this corner, my father and I quickly divided up the work. We had to check every single blind spot along the community fence for more ladders. But as we scanned the feeds, we didn't see a soul. I started marking the locations of the ladders on our map. In total, there were 5 of them. They were spread out, but when I connected the dots on the screen, I realized these ladders basically surrounded the entire community. It turns out those people hadn't shown up at the main gate because they were scouting the perimeter. How could I have been so careless? I thought they used that poor guy as zombie bait just to force the front door, but that was nothing more than a distraction. They wanted to climb the walls and move in for the long haul. My father's words haunted me. "If they settle in, we'll never get rid of them." We immediately called a small emergency meeting right there in the living room. I pulled out the map to show them how the ladders were positioned. At first, I thought they were climbing over because they couldn't break the main gate. But Dad was right. They want to stay here permanently. They're avoiding the front entrance so they don't damage the community's primary defense. "So they're going to search every house in the community?" Mom asked. Dad simply nodded, his face grim. "Our house is fully furnished, which makes it an easy target. There aren't any zombies left inside the community walls. That means the usual tactics from movies and novels are useless here. Aside from my family, there is no one else left to help us. Once they settle in, it will be nearly impossible to kick them out." In this emergency, there was only one thing left for us to do. We had to make sure we weren't discovered, and I sat there thinking for a long time. Eventually, Mom called me over to eat some crab, and I walked over slowly. But the food didn't smell good to me anymore. Then, I heard a thud. Suddenly, the tablet emitted the sound of something heavy hitting the ground. Dad and I dropped our plates and rushed toward the tablet on the sofa. The top of a man's head was peeking over the top of the perimeter wall. He scanned the area and then tossed a large cardboard box over the fence. As it hit the ground, fresh red blood began to leak from the bottom. The blood started flowing everywhere across the pavement. I didn't have to think twice to know what was inside those boxes. Seeing no zombies nearby, the man signaled with his head and climbed over the fence. He was clutching a long bamboo pole with a sharp knife tied to the end. The man circled the box several times, ignoring the growing puddle of blood. He stepped closer, and the fresh blood began to stain his pants. One by one, the men climbed over the wall until there were 3 of them. Every single one of them held a knife and carried a backpack. I figured that's where they kept all their supplies. The group hugged the fence, moving with extreme caution. Once they vanished from sight, only the bloody footprints and the 2 cardboard boxes remained. The boxes kept dripping blood as the last of the daylight faded away. Then there was the guy with the knife. He led the line around the wall, and after confirming no zombies were near, they headed for the main gate. They called him Brother Chet. "Look, this door is open," one of them whispered. "No, it's locked tight," a short man corrected him. The short, dark man tugged at the iron lock and looked back at their leader, Brother Chen Nguyen. Chen didn't say a word. He just walked silently toward the security booth and stepped inside. A few minutes later, he stepped back out. The security booth was empty, but the door had been locked from the inside. That meant one thing. The people living here had likely locked it themselves. The men immediately began scanning their surroundings with newfound caution. "Don't separate. We don't know how many people are here, so we'll search from the main entrance. If we find anyone inside, we just..." Brother Chen made a slicing motion across his throat, signaling their death. These people were truly something else. Cold-blooded and ruthless, the 13 men lined up. They started with the villa closest to the entrance, searching house by house. Since the houses were mostly empty, there were no places for anyone to hide. They cleared half of the area in no time. Soon, they reached the small park in the center of the complex. "Brother Chun, it looks like these houses aren't inhabited yet," the guy with the knife said. He flopped down onto the park grass, exhausted from the constant tension of the search. Brother Chun looked back at the villas they had already cleared. Then he fixed his gaze on the ones they hadn't reached yet. Judging by the exterior of the houses, that lock might not be a big deal after all. A construction worker could have put it there, the dark, chubby man suggested. He sat on the grass too, panting for breath, while Brother Chun watched him. I glanced at the man with the knife and saw him staring straight ahead. "Check further up. If there's no one there either, we stop searching," Chun ordered. "It's a good thing we listened to CG and didn't reinforce the outer fence," my mother whispered. I realized they were only a few houses away from us now. They were approaching Villa A5, and the situation was looking grim. My eyes tracked the man with the knife as he passed 2 more villas. The man with the knife gave the last few houses a casual, disinterested glance. Maybe because those villas looked the same as the others, he turned back toward the group. "Brother Chun, there's no one in the villas up ahead either," he reported upon his return. The guy with the knife dropped his bamboo pole, sat among the crowd, and closed his eyes to rest. Brother Chun simply nodded to show he understood. He set down his backpack and started rummaging through it. A few minutes later, he pulled out a single compressed biscuit. He began to eat it slowly. Since he didn't have any water, he walked over to the community fountain and took a few sips. Then he went right back to finishing his biscuit. It was clear that their supplies were running dangerously low. But there was nothing for them in this community. No food, no clothes, nothing. Aside from the water, I didn't see any way for them to stay here for long. With the food they have, they can only stay 3 or 4 days at most, my father whispered, shaking his head. The fewer people there are, the more resources they'll have to fight over. I had a feeling my new neighbors were about to put on quite a show for us. It had only been 1 day since the zombie outbreak began. Our neighbors decided to rest in a villa near the park, but there were no cameras inside the houses. I had no idea what they were doing in there, and I deeply regretted not being more thorough. I should have installed cameras throughout the entire community when I had the chance. Early the next morning, they finally emerged from the villa and headed to the park. A tumbars tranquillament in el cesta tomar. El sol, busca el hermano chin entre la multitud, pero no lo 6, así. Empieza buscar al tipo del cuchillo. Pero tampoco lo encontré, que estarían tremendo esos dos, en la villa, cerca del medio de la ciudad. Dia, el tipo del cuchillo salió. De la vida, el cuchillo salió. Ella, se paró frente a todos y dijo agresivamente. Entregan todos sus suministros, vamos a redistribuirlos. Aunque todos, en el grupo eran hombres, el del cuchillo era el más fuerte, nadie se movía. Todos se aferraron con fuerza. Sus mochilas, sin intención de entregar sus provisions, uno. Hombre alto, delgado y con gafas dijo débilmente. Hace unos días dijeron que no se podía ver. Que esa era la última vez que repartiríamos los suministros, al or al hombre. De gafas, hablar primero, otro joven que parecía estudiante. Ese unio, el reparto de suministros ya fue injusto. Nosotros hemos sido ahorrativos to do el camino. Ustedes comen cuando les da la oportunidad. Queren y ahora dicen que repartimos to do en I lo sunan. El tipo del cuchillo, sin decir palabra, aramicho con su palo de bambú contra el hombre de gafas. El cuchillo se clavó en el cuerpo del hombre de gafas. El tipo giró la muñeca, rotando la joya dentro del cuerpo antes de sacarla y apuñalarla. Frenéticamente una y otra vez, hasta que el hombre de la dejó de respirar. El tipo del cuchillo detuvo sus movimientos. He wiped the blood splattered across his face. He smirked and said with total indifference, now he finally agrees to donate his supplies. Seeing this, the student grabbed the dead man's bag and bolted from the group. In an instant, the guy with the knife spat on the ground, preparing to hunt him down. Then Brother Chin stepped out, his face dark but wearing a forced smile. We're all in this together anyway, he said, tossing his half-empty bag down. I'll be the first to hand mine over. Does anyone else object to redistributing the food? His gaze swept over the crowd with a blood-chilling grin. One by one, everyone threw their bags into the pile. I wasn't in the mood to watch them divvy up scraps, so I started looking around. Out of everyone there, only that student had any real guts. He was smart enough to know he wouldn't survive them, so he vanished. I scanned the area, but there was no sign of where the brat had run to. Then I saw him, hiding right under the tree in front of my own house. He was peeking out, keeping a desperate eye on the small park, checking to see if the guy with the knife was coming for him. Once he felt safe, he tore open the stolen bag and dumped all the food out. Well, here I go. I grabbed everything I didn't need. I stuffed it all into a backpack and threw it right in front of me. I stood by the door, wanting to make them believe there was a man inside. If he actually tried to enter this house, he'd be a complete idiot. Maybe I overestimated him. I thought he was smarter than that. I pulled up the video feed of the park, and they were still divvying things up. Disgusted by their fair redistribution, I switched back to the other camera. I whispered to the student on the screen, if you don't find a way to slip away now, you'll never get out. I watched until my mother walked up softly to call me for dinner. The moment I heard the word, eat, I put my phone down immediately. I rushed over, knowing how rare this was in the apocalypse. Being able to eat a hot, home-cooked meal from mom every day was pure bliss. It was an immense feeling of safety. Ever since Brother Chun and his group arrived nearby, we haven't made any stir-fried dishes at all. The smell of smoke and sizzling oil is just too obvious. Who knows if one of them has an extraordinary sense of smell. So for today, Mom prepared dumplings with various fillings. Hot dumplings served with aromatic vinegar. She also made seaweed egg soup, and my parents helped me prepare an egg dish. They decided to save the rest for New Year's, since it had been so long since we celebrated a birthday. Would we ever celebrate a normal New Year again? I honestly didn't know. This apocalypse, it has to end, but the end is nowhere in sight. I wondered when humanity would celebrate normally again as I finished my meal. I performed my only duty in the kitchen, washing the dishes, after my parents left. They went off to rest, so I projected the surveillance feed from my tablet onto the TV. I wanted a better look at the screen. I curled up on the sofa to watch the drama unfold like a palace intrigue. I still had a lot to learn about schemes and manipulation from these people. Just as the tension was peaking on screen, I paused the video and got up to pour some water, keeping my eyes on the monitors. I saw a few more people out there, looking like they were on patrol. But this complex is huge and Brother Chin didn't bring many men. They can't watch every corner. In the silence, I hoped that student had managed to find a good hiding spot. At the same time, I wasn't worried about Brother Chen searching house to house again. His team had already lost one person today. Plus, everyone's supplies were being forcibly shared with his group. Because of Brother Chen's greed, they weren't as united as they used to be. Maybe someone inside his own circle was already planning a rebellion. Brother Chen isn't stupid enough to order another search right now. For now, we're safe. Day 16. As the zombie apocalypse dragged on, the weather turned biting cold. Down in the basement, we all wore padded clothes and showered less often. Heating solar water for a single shower took at least an hour. Brother Chen and his group found some villas by the park to squat in. They hadn't stepped outside for several days. Their small backpacks definitely didn't have room for heavy winter gear. I checked the bag the student had scavenged. Besides the meager food, it was empty. I checked the cameras I had installed to spy on them. Some of those villas provided them with a place to live, complete with luxury finishes and sturdy floors. But the city's electricity and water were long gone. At that moment, they had shelter, but with no furniture, they could hide from the wind, but not the piercing cold. In this city, a damp place hidden from the sun is a death trap. Without a strong constitution, I don't know if they'll survive. As for the student, maybe he learned his lesson and chose to flee. I hadn't seen him anywhere for days. Even in an apocalypse, you don't always see zombies, but the misery is everywhere. Lately, very few people have been seen at the entrance of the complex. Not a single car has passed through the front gate. If I weren't down in this basement, the zombies I've seen would feel like a dream. Day 20. I don't know what became of the world out there. As for Brother Chun and his people, according to my math, if that incident hadn't happened the other day, I remembered President Juan Pablo Sanchez appearing in an exam hall, laying out the whole situation. I felt like my mind was about to turn a year of study into a graduate degree. How could I possibly miss student life at a time like this? Bam! A loud crash broke my trance, and I quickly looked for the source. The sound was coming from the entrance of the complex. Suddenly, a massive truck appeared, slamming relentlessly into the gate. It kept hitting the iron bars over and over. My parents heard the noise too and rushed over to see. We stared at the monitor, frozen. Every muscle in my body was tense. The truck looked like one of those heavy rigs from back home in Venezuela. After a while, I realized something was wrong. Something was off. That truck wasn't actually trying to knock the gate down. A vehicle that big could have broken through easily if it wanted to. It wouldn't take more than 3 hits to break through if they really wanted to. Then, Brother Chun and his men appeared near the entrance. The moment I saw them, I realized what was happening. It was a distraction. A noise that loud was designed to grab everyone's attention inside. They wanted us focused entirely on the gate. At the main entrance, Brother Chun and his crew seemed to have forgotten the woman's death. They couldn't see the truck from their spot, so they had no idea what was coming. I quickly switched the camera feeds to check the perimeter walls from every angle. Sure enough, right at the corner where the guy with the dagger had placed the ladder before, I saw a head peeking over the top. It was the student. He was back, and it turned out he'd gone to find reinforcements. Now he was leading them in through the exact same path the dagger guy used. The student was the first to jump the wall, whispering something to the person behind him. Another man's head appeared, scanning the area carefully. I recognized them immediately. They were the thugs from the city center. The reinforcements he brought were the same group of heavy-set brutes. The same ones who killed the third Lee brother were now lurking on our side of the street. A bloody massacre was looming, and their leader was ready. His group of burly men jumped inside with agile precision, lining up against the wall. Once the last man landed safely, the leader pulled out his phone and made a call. The massive truck finally stopped ramming the gate. It pulled away, leaving a heavy silence in its wake. Maybe they didn't plan on staying long after all. Unlike Brother Chen's group, these newcomers looked like they could actually handle themselves. If it came down to it, they were more than capable of taking Brother Chen out. In terms of raw muscle, only the guy with the dagger could even hope to compete with those brutes. The leader gave a sharp signal to the rest of his men. Quickly, they split into teams of 5 and sprinted toward the nearest villa. The leader kept watch at the front for a moment. Then, he followed them inside. I stared at the monitor, watching the now empty section of the perimeter wall. If I hadn't seen the intrusion with my own eyes, I would have been fooled too. I would have thought the truck just gave up and left because it couldn't break the gate. Brother Chun, looking dead serious, gestured for his people to calm down. He told them to go back to rest, but then he called a few others aside. He pulled the dagger guy and the fat guy in the beanie away from the crowd. The 3 of them crept away stealthily toward the guardhouse. Brother, we aren't going back with the others? What are we doing here? The fat guy asked, confused. If you want to go back, go by yourself, Brother Chin snapped, glaring at him. He picked up a loose brick from the grass and handed it to the guy with the dagger. Brother, wouldn't it be faster to just smash the glass? I'm worried the noise will attract them, Brother Chin said, falling silent for a moment. He looked at the lock and repeated his order. I told you to break it, so do it. You talk too much. The guy with the dagger didn't argue further and slammed the brick against the lock. He hit it several times until it finally gave way. The 3 of them crept inside the guardhouse on their tiptoes. I waited until I saw no more movement on the cameras before calling my parents. I brought them into the living room and gave them a quick rundown of the situation. From our monitors, we had a front row seat to everything happening outside. I could already guess the leader's intentions. He was planning a surprise attack tonight. That student must have told those brutes that there were no zombies inside the complex. When you aren't sure if your enemy has experts on their side, a night raid is the smartest move you can make. The other group still hadn't realized they had intruders on the grounds, but Brother Chun was sharp. He had clearly noticed something was wrong. He told his people to calm down, just so he could use them as human shields. He was buying time for his own escape plan, though I couldn't be certain yet. Maybe he thought the guardhouse was his best bet because it was close to the exit. Being near the gate made it easy to bolt if things went south, or perhaps, maybe he thought he'd find weapons in there to defend himself. Or perhaps he believed the most dangerous place was the safest spot to hide. Whatever the case, a battle tonight was inevitable. It was going to be fierce, but there was something else weighing on my mind. If those thugs managed to seize control of the entire complex, they would eventually search every single corner. In a residential area this empty, a lived-in villa would stick out like a sore thumb. Would they turn our home upside down just to see what else we had? I had already seen how mercilessly they treated their own third brother. I didn't trust them for a second. In fact, I feared them even more than I feared Brother Chun. We decided that the whole family would keep watch from the living room tonight. I dragged all the blankets to the sofa in the center of the house. With the biting cold, catching a fever was easy and medicine was scarce. We had to bundle up and stay warm if we wanted to survive. Dad checked the gate and kept piling up heavy objects to block the entrance. Meanwhile, Mom prepared some hot noodles for us. The warmth of the house shielded us from the freezing air outside. As night fell, the oppressive silence of the dark grew even heavier. And then, the shadows outside finally began to move. One by one, they emerged with their weapons, moving silently through the pitch-black darkness. The inhabited villas had their lights on, standing out like beacons in the night. The burly men split up into small teams. They began their coordinated advance. As they reached the lit villas, screams tore through the silent night, followed by begging and sobbing. Brother Chin crept out of the guardhouse and went straight for the main gate. He pulled out a key to unlock the heavy chain. I couldn't believe it. There was actually a spare key hidden in that guardhouse. Brother Chin opened the gate just wide enough to slip through. He gave the iron bars a soft, rhythmic tap as a signal. The fat man and the guy with the dagger managed to get out too, but they didn't run yet. Instead, they grabbed the gate and pushed with all their might. They wanted to escape through the entrance, but they wanted something else too. They were planning to let the zombies in. The thugs were busy in the center of the complex, their shouting drowning out the sound of the opening gate. Once the entrance was wide open, the trio finally vanished into the night. I watched with fury, knowing the smell of fresh blood from the massacre would draw the monsters in. Sure enough, the surrounding zombies caught the scent and let out a collective roar as they lunged inside. The human screams were gone, replaced by the guttural growls and frantic footsteps of the undead. The leader of the thugs turned pale, his face darkening with rage as he let out a desperate shout. "Let's go, everyone to the wall." The crowd scrambled toward the perimeter in a panic. There was no ladder on the inside, so they had to use each other as human stepping stones. They stepped on each other's shoulders to climb up, cursing the whole way. The leader kept glancing back, urging them to move faster, but something caught my eye. I was surprised to see that the leader didn't climb up first. Instead, he stayed behind to cover the rear for his brothers. By the time the zombies closed in, most of the group had already cleared the fence. A zombie sprinted frantically toward the boss. "Jump now," a burly man screamed, reaching his hand down from the top. Just as the monster was about to lunge into the air after him, the leader leaped, grabbing the other man's hand with a desperate grip. Then, they all pulled together. With a collective heave, they hauled him up onto the ledge. Before they could even catch their breath, the area below was swarming. Dozens of zombies surrounded the base of the wall, snapping at the air. "Keep the noise down and get down on the other side now," the leader ordered, panting. Every single one of them obeyed without question. They descended the ladder on the outside in an orderly line. The leader was the very last one to go. Nobody questioned him, proving he was used to covering the rear. When his turn finally came, he reached down and grabbed the ladder. He threw it back inside the complex, right toward the police chief. "What's wrong? Aren't you coming?" his men asked, completely bewildered. The leader gave a bitter smile and spoke with total resolve. "You all have to live well for me," he said. With those final words, he let himself fall backward. He dropped straight into the waiting horde of zombies. The group watched in horror, and one man even tried to climb back up the wall. Cursing and crying, he was dragged away toward safety. Watching through the security cameras, I saw the truth as the leader fell. That first zombie had already managed to scratch his leg. I didn't expect him to end his life in such a difficult way. So decisive, yet so hard to watch. It's hard to describe what kind of man he really was. On the first day of the apocalypse, he brought his brothers to my house and stole our supplies. He was the one who killed the third brother. And just 30 minutes ago, his men had massacred everyone else in the villa. They were all covered in blood. But every time they fought, that leader was at the front lines. And when they retreated, he stayed behind to cover the rear until everyone was safe. Once he realized he was wounded, he didn't hesitate to give up. He gave up his life right there in the middle of the apocalypse. In this new world, good and evil aren't enough to describe a person anymore. When dawn finally broke, I started counting the zombies in the area. I watched them through the security cameras. Last night's massacre and the smell of fresh blood had attracted a massive horde. They were wandering through every single corner of the residential complex. The main gate was wide open, and with zombies everywhere, no one else would dare try to enter. I looked at my parents and asked, "Can we ever go back out into the sunlight?" My mother just pulled me into a tight embrace and sobbed. Too much had happened over these last few days. After confirming several times that the zombies couldn't break through the garden fence, we finally unlocked the basement door and stepped outside. Living underground for so long made the sun feel blinding. I could barely keep my eyes open at first, but breathing that fresh air made me feel like I had been born again. It was day 52 of the apocalypse, and lately, a plane had been circling the complex. An announcement blared. "Attention citizens, the nation has established a massive safe zone." They were directing everyone toward the city's main funeral complex. Anyone who hears this message should make their way there by any means possible. We provide regular meals and medical care. You are welcome here. Excited, I shared the news with my parents immediately. "Our supplies are enough for now," my father said. "It's better not to risk the trip." Even though he was happy to hear it, he didn't plan on leaving, and I nodded in agreement. The truth was, the mountain of supplies I had stashed away was probably even larger than what the safe zone could offer. Besides, there was no way we could carry all of this with us. The safe zone only guaranteed protection from the zombies. I couldn't predict if we'd have to deal with power struggles or human conflict once we arrived. So, we made the choice to stay put. We would leave those government supplies for the people who needed them more. A new dawn approached, day 136 of the zombie apocalypse. Electricity, water, and the internet had finally returned to normal. Safe zones across the entire country were now fully established. The government was organized, the army was exterminating zombies on a massive scale, and the Research Institute was accelerating the development of a cure. It was the rebirth of humanity. Day 190 of the outbreak has arrived. The government has officially announced the successful development of the antidote. They are rushing its distribution to every single citizen. There isn't a single zombie left on the streets. People are finally stepping outside to embrace their friends. For the survivors, every hug feels like a miracle. They share their stories and catch up on everything they lost. Today is such a beautiful day. It is a truly beautiful day, and I know tomorrow will be just as bright. Thank you.